What would you do if the person you trusted most was secretly planning to leave you and take everything with them? It was a normal Tuesday morning, overcast and a little chilly, the kind of day that makes you want to crawl back into bed with a cup of coffee and a mindless Netflix show. I was standing in the kitchen in my favorite oversized sweatshirt, pouring oat milk into my mug, when I saw the email. No subject line. No sender name, just the word anonymous. I almost deleted it, but then I read the first line. Sarah, you don't know me, but you need to protect yourself. He's already meeting with a divorce attorney. My hand froze midair. My stomach dropped like I'd just missed a step walking down the stairs. For a second, I thought it had to be spam, some scam, or a phishing attempt. But the email continued, mentioning things only someone close to us would know. He met with a woman named Linda Stevens last Thursday at 4:30 p.m. The law firm is in downtown Portland. He didn't tell you about that dinner, did he? He didn't. He said he had to work late. I felt like I was watching my own life happen from somewhere outside my body. I stood there staring at the screen, coffee steaming in my hand, the sounds of my suburban neighborhood drifting through the window, distant lawn mowers, barking dogs, a delivery truck backing up. It all felt so normal, but I wasn't in normal anymore. I was in free fall. That email wasn't just a red flag, it was a flare shot into the night sky. The man I had trusted, the man I had married, the man I had shared a home, a life, and nearly 2 decades with, was making plans without me. Life-changing plans. At first, I wanted to believe there had been some mistake. Maybe it was a joke or someone trying to stir up trouble. But something in my gut wouldn't let it go. Daniel had been different lately. Distant. Distracted. Careless in ways he never was before. He used to send me good morning texts when he left for work early. That had stopped months ago. His phone had started living face down. He'd been working late a lot. He got defensive easily. Sex had become transactional at best. And worst of all, he was polite. Not affectionate. Not warm. Just polite. The kind of politeness you reserve for a waitress or an ex. And now, a stranger knew about his meeting with a divorce attorney. I opened the email again and scrolled to the bottom. You didn't hear it from me. But if you don't act fast, he's going to clean you out. He's already moving assets. Check the bank account ending in 9921. I didn't even know we had a bank account ending in 9921. I took a deep breath and forced myself to think clearly. My background as a former lawyer kicked in the part of my brain that loved facts and hated panic. If this was real, I needed to confirm it. Quietly. First, I logged into our shared bank accounts. Everything looked normal at first. Our joint checking, savings, and mortgage payments. But then I pulled the full transaction history for the last 3 months. There it was. A wire transfer 2 weeks ago, $42,500 to an account I didn't recognize. The note read, Investment Account Restructuring. I remembered asking Daniel about it at the time. He shrugged it off as a financial move for tax purposes. I believed him. Now, I wasn't so sure. I Googled Linda Stevens, divorce attorney, Portland, and found her within seconds. A boutique family law office. High-end. Discreet. My heart pounded as I called her office. A young assistant answered. Hi, I said, keeping my voice calm. My name is Sarah Miller. I believe my husband may have contacted your office regarding legal services. I'm just trying to verify. I'm sorry, ma'am, she interrupted quickly. We can't confirm or deny any potential clients. Attorney-client confidentiality. Got it. That was confirmation enough. He'd been there. That night, Daniel came home at 7:10 p.m. Hair perfect. Shirt crisp. No lipstick stains or perfume, just that smug calmness he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. Hey, babe, he said, kissing me on the forehead. I resisted the urge to flinch. How was work? I asked. Long, stressful. We had a meeting that ran over. At this point, I knew how people felt when they said their life flashed before their eyes. But instead of fear, I felt something else blooming inside me. Strategy. I smiled and nodded like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just found out he was plotting to leave me behind. If he wanted to play lawyer games, fine. He forgot I used to be one. But before I could even move forward, I had to ask myself one question. Was this marriage already over, or was I willing to fight for it? The truth? I didn't know yet. What I did know was that I wouldn't be caught off guard again. If he was going to leave me, it wouldn't be with my dignity, my finances, or my peace of mind in his pocket. He wanted a divorce? I was going to give him the most expensive one he'd ever imagined. Hit subscribe and leave a comment. What's the first thing you'd do if you found out your spouse was secretly planning to leave you? This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? You wouldn't look at me and think, here's a woman who's about to wage war. To most people, I was just another suburban mom with a golden retriever, a well-tended garden, and a Costco membership. My days were filled with grocery runs, PDA meetings, and the occasional girls' brunch with mimosas and polite complaints about husbands forgetting to take the trash out. But behind the smile, behind the perfectly arranged cheese boards and Pinterest-worthy dinner parties, there was a different woman, one I hadn't called on in years. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 38 years old. And before I was a stay-at-home mom in Portland, Oregon, I was a damn good attorney. I graduated top of my class at Berkeley Law. Spent 7 years climbing the ranks at a prestigious firm in San Francisco. I was sharp, confident, and, if I'm being honest, a little ruthless when I needed to be. I handled tough divorces, complicated custody battles, and billion-dollar estate disputes. I thrived in chaos. I liked the fight. But I gave it all up. For love. I met Daniel when I was 29. I was already burnt out from 70-hour weeks, tired of always being in control of everyone else's disaster. He was calm, charming in an old-school way, opened doors, remembered how I liked my coffee, always called when he said he would. Our first date, he brought flowers. Not the supermarket kind. Real ones, wrapped in brown paper with a handwritten note. You looked like you needed something pretty today. 6 months later, we moved in together. 2 years later, we were married. And when I got pregnant with Emma, our daughter, I didn't hesitate. I want to stay home for a while, I told him. Daniel smiled like I'd just made his life easier. Of course, he said. We'll be fine. You've worked so hard. You deserve to slow down. So I did. And I kept slowing down for over a decade. Some women say motherhood completes them. For me, it complicated everything. I loved Emma with my whole soul. But there were days I missed being the woman in a courtroom, not just the one baking cupcakes at midnight for class parties. Still, I adapted. I poured my skills into our household, managing our finances, organizing everything down to the minute, making sure Daniel never had to worry about a thing beyond his next big meeting. I became his biggest cheerleader, sounding board and emotional dump zone. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as a partner. And I stopped seeing myself. I started shrinking to fit inside the lines of the life we'd built together. If you'd asked anyone who knew us, our neighbors, friends from church, Emma's teachers, they would have said we were the perfect couple. Daniel, with his tailored suits and steady career. Me, with my carefully maintained schedule and warm, practiced smile. But what no one saw was what happened behind the closed door of our bedroom. The distance. The silence. The slow, constant withdrawal. Looking back, I think I ignored it for years. I told myself we were just busy. That all marriages plateau eventually. That maybe this was just the comfortable phase no one talks about in wedding vows. But deep down, I knew something was off. I just didn't want to face what that meant. Then there was Emma. She's 12 now. Smart, observant, too perceptive for her own good. She once told me, in her usual blunt style, you and Dad talk more like coworkers than people who are married. That stung. But it was true. Daniel stopped asking about my day a long time ago. He rarely touched me unless it was expected, like in public, at events, where appearances mattered. His compliments, when they came, were surface level and scripted. "You look nice." "Dinner was great. Thanks for doing that." Never, "I missed you." Or, "I'm proud of you." Or even, "Are you okay?" I didn't need flowers or jewelry. I needed to be seen. And somehow, I had become invisible. But I wasn't broken. Not completely. There was still fire in me, buried beneath the routines and resentment. I just hadn't needed to call on it, until now. When I got that email, something shifted. Not just fear. Something else. Something familiar. Fight. It wasn't just about betrayal or hurt feelings. It was about survival. I had walked away from my career, my identity, and part of myself to build this life with Daniel. And now he was planning to walk away and take the foundation with him? No. Not without a fight. Not without me taking back everything I gave up. Not without me reclaiming who I was before I became just a wife and mom. The next morning, I dropped Emma off at school like nothing had changed. We talked about her science fair project and whether she could stay over at Lily's house Friday night. I kissed her goodbye and waved until her backpack disappeared into the building. Then I sat in my car and let the tears come. Not because I was sad. Because I was angry. Because I was done pretending. Because I knew exactly who I needed to become again. I went home, pulled out my old laptop from the back of the closet, and powered it up. It had been years since I'd used it. The screen flickered to life like a time capsule. I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Contingency plan, Sarah Miller." If Daniel wanted to start a war behind my back, fine. He just forgot one thing. I've already won tougher battles. And this time, it's personal. On paper, we looked solid. Married for 12 years. 1 daughter, 1 dog, 2 cars, a craftsman-style home with a wraparound porch and a backyard big enough for barbecues. People called us relationship goals. They had no idea. I used to think love faded quietly, like a dimmer switch slowly being turned down. But now I think it's more like water damage. It spreads underneath the surface while everything looks fine above. Until one day, the ceiling caves in. That ceiling started cracking long before the email. I just didn't want to look up. Daniel was the kind of man who made good impressions. He had that calm, charming presence that made strangers trust him. At parties, he was always the one refilling drinks, asking the right questions, making people feel interesting. He was magnetic when he wanted to be. But behind closed doors, the magnetism faded. Not all at once. Little by little. He stopped asking how I slept. He stopped kissing me goodbye in the morning. He stopped noticing when I cried at the end of a long day, or worse, he noticed and just walked past. The first time I truly felt it, we were at a dinner party. I wore a navy blue dress I'd saved for weeks to buy. I had my hair done, even wore the red lipstick he used to love. As we walked in, I caught him glancing at me, and for a second, I hoped for a compliment. He leaned in and said, "You've got something in your teeth." That was it. Not "you look amazing." Not even "nice dress." Just spinach and silence. Our conversations became logistics. "Did you pay the water bill?" "Emma has soccer at 4. I'll be late, don't wait up." It was like living with a roommate who occasionally shared your bed, but not your thoughts, not your soul. I chalked it up to the years. Life was busy. Work was stressful. Maybe we just needed a vacation. We took one, actually. 3 nights in Napa. We barely spoke. But the signs weren't just emotional, they were physical too. Daniel had always taken pride in being a present father. But over the last year, he started missing things: school plays, dentist appointments, even Emma's parent-teacher conference. When I asked, he'd say things like, "I've got a deadline," or "traffic was a nightmare." The excuses were subtle, reasonable, until they weren't. One night, he came home 2 hours late. I was waiting on the couch in the dark. Emma was already asleep. "Where were you?" I asked. He didn't even flinch. Work ran late. You didn't call. My phone died. And your backup charger? He stared at me like I was the problem. What are you, my parole officer? And just like that, the argument exploded. It wasn't just about the lateness. It was about everything I had swallowed for months, maybe years. The loneliness, the resentment, the way he looked through me like I was background noise. I'm not your assistant, Daniel, I snapped. And I'm not stupid. I never said you were. You didn't have to. That night, we slept in the same bed, backs turned, silence thick between us. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. Coffee brewed, news on the TV, buttoning his shirt like it wasn't unraveling everything. What hurts the most isn't when someone lies to you. It's when they make you question your reality. When they look you in the eye and gaslight you with a smile. I started second-guessing everything. Was I too sensitive? Too demanding? Was I not attractive anymore? I tried harder. I lost 10 pounds. I read relationship books. I made his favorite meals, left notes in his briefcase, even scheduled date nights. He canceled 3 out of 4. I've got work, he said. Always work. I should have known it was something else. Around this time, I found myself lying during small talk. When friends asked, "How are things with you and Daniel?" I'd say, "Busy, but good," and change the subject. It was easier than admitting the truth. That I felt invisible. That I cried alone in the shower so Emma wouldn't hear. That the man I married was slipping away and I didn't know how to stop it or even if I wanted to anymore. One day, Emma came into the kitchen while I was making dinner. "Do you and Dad still love each other?" she asked, out of nowhere. I nearly dropped the pan. "Of course we do, sweetie. Why would you ask that?" She shrugged. "You don't laugh anymore. You used to laugh together." 12 years old. Seeing more than I wanted her to, I started keeping a journal, not the kind where you write about sunsets and gratitude. The kind where you try to stay sane. Here's what I wrote one night. "I think he's already gone. I think he left months ago. He just forgot to take his body with him." That was 2 weeks before the email arrived. Part of me had been waiting for something to confirm it, to rip the illusion apart so I didn't have to pretend anymore. And when that anonymous message came through, it didn't surprise me. It just set everything in motion. A marriage doesn't end in one big, dramatic moment. It dies in the little things. The empty "I love you" before bed. The way he walks past you like furniture. The conversations that are all surface and no soul. But sometimes, the illusion lingers. You cling to it because the alternative is terrifying. Starting over, being alone, facing the shame of a failed marriage. Still, the truth has a way of crashing through loud, sharp, and undeniable. And when it did, I didn't break. I got ready. The thing about being married to someone for 12 years is, you learn their patterns. Daniel was nothing if not predictable. He brushed his teeth for exactly 2 minutes. He double-knotted his shoes. He used the same cologne since 2011. He backed into parking spaces, always added a tip of exactly 20%, and read emails like he was scanning for bombs. He was methodical, measured, careful, which made what he was doing now all the more terrifying. Because if he was planning to leave me, you better believe he'd be doing it strategically, quietly, legally, and with every financial detail lined up. The email had said, "Check the bank account ending in 9921. The problem was, I didn't have access to an account ending in 9921, which meant Daniel had opened it on his own. I waited until he left the house the next morning, claimed he had an early client consult downtown. Emma was already at school. I had exactly 5 hours before either of them came home. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen counter, and opened my laptop. No distractions. Just the facts. First stop, our shared online banking login. We had 4 main accounts: joint checking, joint savings, Emma's college fund, and a credit card. All looked normal. But as I dug through the monthly statements and cross-referenced activity from our autopay bills and investments, something didn't add up. I found multiple transfers over the last 90 days to an unfamiliar routing number. Small at first, $500 here, $800 there. Then one for $7,200 labeled Q3 tax buffer. Another for $15,000 with no label at all. That one stung. We had talked about using that money for home repairs, replacing the roof, fixing the bathroom tiles, maybe even a vacation for our anniversary. But Daniel had sent it somewhere else. Quietly. Without telling me. The transfers all traced back to a routing number for a Sunrise Ridge Credit Union account. I'd never heard of it, but Daniel had. I remembered. 2 months ago, he came home with a branded water bottle from a networking event. Sunrise Ridge. He said he'd grabbed it on the way out. At the time, it seemed random. Now, it felt like the beginning of a paper trail. Next, I checked his calendar. Daniel had a shared digital schedule, and while he'd recently stopped syncing everything to our joint app, I remembered he kept paper backups in his home office, old school, spiral-bound planners. I snuck in while the dog was napping and pulled the most recent one off the shelf. Thursday, 4:30 p.m., LS. Client brief. LS. Linda Stevens. The attorney the anonymous email warned me about. My stomach clenched. The more I uncovered, the less it felt like paranoia, and the more it looked like a fully executed plan. I wasn't crazy. I was just one step behind. I took a risk and called an old friend from law school, Rachel Ingwin. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but we'd worked together at the firm, and I knew she'd understand the stakes. When she picked up, I didn't waste time. Rachel, it's Sarah. I think Daniel's planning to divorce me, and he's hiding assets. I need your help. There was a pause. Then, tell me everything. From the top. Rachel listened without interrupting, then said exactly what I didn't want to hear, but needed to. If he's already seeing an attorney, you're behind. But not out. You need to get ahead now legally and financially. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'll email you a checklist, she continued. You need to collect everything, bank records, property deeds, business filings, any assets that aren't jointly titled. And don't let him know you're aware. Yet. I stared at my coffee cup. What if he's already moved most of it? Then you find out what's left and protect it. This is chess, Sarah. You don't show your queen until you're ready to checkmate. That night, I looked at Daniel differently. He came home with Thai takeout like it was any other Thursday. He kissed the top of my head, dropped the brown paper bag on the kitchen counter, and asked, "You want your usual?" I nodded. Thanks. We sat at the table in silence, picking through pad CEW and spring rolls while Emma told us about a pop quiz in science class. I watched him laugh at her joke. I watched him wipe his mouth with a napkin and reach for the remote afterward. I watched him exist in my house like nothing was wrong. Like he wasn't quietly stealing my life out from under me. The thing about betrayal is, it's never just one act. It's a series of tiny choices. Hiding things. Lying by omission. Taking without asking. Playing innocent while you're already halfway out the door. I used to believe in the big reveal. The dramatic confrontation, the tearful apology, the emotional unraveling. But this wasn't a movie. This was war. And Daniel had already drawn first blood. That night, after he went to bed, I stayed up and scanned every document in our home office. Tax returns, mortgage agreements, old investment portfolios, anything with numbers, signatures, or his handwriting. Then I opened a blank spreadsheet and started cataloging it all. Every cent. Every asset. Every insurance policy. Retirement fund, mutual account, business interest, title, trust, and stock option. I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to build a fortress. Before shutting down my laptop, I opened the anonymous email one more time. I read it slowly, word by word, and paused at the last line. You didn't hear it from me, but if you don't act fast, he's going to clean you out. Not today. Not ever. The next morning, the house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel had left early for a client breakfast, which now read like code for move more money while she's sleeping. Emma was still asleep. The dog snored softly on the rug by the window. And me? I was staring at Daniel's laptop. It sat on the kitchen table, open but untouched. Normally, it never left his home office. He guarded that thing like it held state secrets. He even password-protected individual folders. He didn't know I'd watched him type his login one too many times to forget. Passcode, Black Dog 82. Named after a Led Zeppelin song. He thought it was clever. I thought it was lazy. The login worked. My heart pounded as the desktop flickered to life. This felt like crossing a line, but so did planning a secret divorce. The first thing I saw was his usual clutter. Spreadsheets, client presentations, browser tabs left open to investment news and real estate listings. I wasn't looking for what he wanted me to see. I was looking for what he didn't. I opened Finder and sorted by recently modified, and there it was, third from the top. Future planning docs. It didn't look suspicious at first, until I opened it. The document began like an outline. Dry, professional. But as I read, my stomach turned. Future planning. Confidential. Phase 1. Reallocation of liquid assets. Move remaining funds from joint checking to SRCU account. Transfer $25,000 from brokerage to crypto wallet under LLC name. Cease automatic deposits to joint account after March 15th. Phase 2. Legal prep. File divorce in Multnomah County. May 7th tentative. Retain Linda S. as lead counsel. Push for mediation, court, low visibility, faster timeline. Target filing before Sarah's birthday. Keep tone amicable for Emma. Phase 3. Messaging strategy. Sarah likely to respond emotionally. Stay calm. Emphasize growing apart and peaceful co-parenting. Recommend. Don't mention finances unless directly asked. If needed, offer 50-50th split to speed process, but only if forced. Personal notes. Get ahead of narrative. She'll lean lawyer. Prep statements. Avoid triggering anger. Calm equals control. Protect business interests. She'll know where to look. I stopped breathing halfway through. He hadn't just thought about divorce. He planned it. Budgeted for it. Outlined how to manipulate my emotions, how to use my love for Emma as a negotiation tactic. Like I was some hostile witness in a deposition, not his wife. I wasn't even human in this file. I was an obstacle. A variable. A liability. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. My mind raced. I could confront him right now. Screenshot everything. Send it to myself. Call Rachel. Lawyer up. But I didn't. Not yet. Because suddenly I saw the power in holding this information quietly. He thought he was 10 steps ahead. He thought he could control the timeline, the language, the outcome. But now I had the playbook. I kept digging. In a hidden folder titled admin_archive, I found a scanned prenup, one we signed before our wedding but hadn't looked at in over a decade. I'd barely remembered it. At the time, I'd been a rising associate and insisted we didn't need one. Daniel said it was just something to ease his parents' minds. I signed it over dinner in a restaurant. Now, I was staring at the fine print. It was airtight. Generous, at first glance. But laced with loopholes. The kicker? A clause stating that if I'd been out of the workforce for 5 years or more and we divorced, I'd be entitled only to a flat spousal support cap, $2,000/month for 24 months. $2,000. I'd been out of the workforce for 11 years. So that was the plan. He'd spent years luring me into a life of dependence. Encouraged me to stay home. Praised me for it. Let me take over the house, the parenting, the appointments, while he quietly positioned himself to walk away and pay me like a babysitter he no longer needed. If I hadn't opened that file, he would have filed in 3 weeks. Right before my birthday. And I wouldn't have seen it coming. I sat in the kitchen and stared at the wall for a full 5 minutes. Then, calmly, I transferred everything, screenshots, copies, the prenup PDF, into a flash drive and locked it in my car glove box. Then I deleted my digital footprint from his device. Let him keep thinking I was clueless. That evening, he came home humming. He poured us both wine and suggested we sit on the porch, something we hadn't done in months. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" I smiled. "Everything's fine," I said. And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. Because I knew the truth. And now I had the advantage. In chess, a good move looks ordinary. It doesn't scream, doesn't shake the table. It shifts the entire game while your opponent still thinks they're winning. That's where I was now. Not crying. Not begging. Calculating. Daniel thought I'd fold. That I'd be emotional, fragile, too stunned to respond. But if he remembered the woman I used to be, the woman I shelved for our marriage, he'd know better. So I made my first move. The next morning, I dropped Emma off at school and drove straight to First Meridian Credit Union, a local bank he never used. I didn't take chances. I wore sunglasses and a baseball cap. Ridiculous, maybe, but I wasn't about to risk bumping into someone Daniel knew. I opened a new personal checking and savings account, both in my name only. I listed my maiden name as an alias, just in case. The teller smiled politely. "Any particular reason for the new account today?" "Just reorganizing things," I said with a smile. "Spring cleaning." Then I had my direct deposit from a small freelance copywriting gig rerouted to this new account. It was only a few $100s a month, but now it wasn't traceable from our joint finances. A small step, but mine. That night, I pretended to be tired and went to bed early, before Daniel. I waited until I heard the TV in the living room, then quietly opened the bedroom closet. From the top shelf, I pulled down a fireproof lockbox we kept for passports and birth certificates. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside, my expired bar license, a safety deposit key I didn't remember, and a certified copy of our house deed. Bingo! I checked the filing date. When we bought the house, we split the ownership 50/50ths. But a refinance 3 years ago had legally titled the house in Daniel's name only. My jaw tightened. I remembered the refinance. It was for better rates, he said. Less paperwork if it was just one name. I was sleep-deprived from Emma's stomach flu and signed it without question. He'd been thinking this far ahead. I made a call to Rachel the next morning. "Do you have a secure office I can meet you at?" I asked. "I do," she said. "And you can trust me. But Sarah, if you're calling me for real now, this means you're ready for war." "I'm not just ready," I said. "I've already started." Rachel and I met that afternoon at a shared workspace downtown. She wore a navy pantsuit and brought 2 coffees. She didn't smile much. She wasn't here to comfort me, she was here to help me win. I slid the flash drive across the table. She plugged it in, scanned the files, and her eyes narrowed. "You've got him," she said flatly. "This is strategic concealment. Financial fraud. This future planning doc alone? That's gold." She pulled out a yellow legal pad and started scribbling. "Here's what we do. 1. We secure your accounts. You already did that, good. 2. We collect evidence. Text messages, voicemails, shared assets, any sign of dishonesty or financial misconduct. And 3, most important, we get ahead of his timeline." I nodded. "He's planning to file May 7th. Then we file May 1st. My pulse quickened. "Me? File first. Sarah, when someone's playing dirty, you don't wait to be the one dragged into court. You control the narrative. File first. Set the tone. Shock him." I exhaled slowly. This was happening. Over the next 5 days, I became 2 women. The wife Daniel thought he was leaving, and the one quietly preparing to destroy his case. I wore my apron and cooked dinner. I smiled at Emma's stories. I even cuddled with Daniel on the couch and pretended to fall asleep while his arm draped over me. But every morning after drop-off, I was in lawyer mode. I built a dossier. All bank statements from the last 2 years. Screenshots of his secret transfers. Records of missed school events, late nights, and calendar entries. The prenup and the clause that punished stay-at-home spouses. Rachel reviewed everything and said something that stuck. He built this like a corporate separation. You're his liability, and he's managing risk. He forgot you're smarter than his accountant. I also began documenting my contributions to the marriage, something most women never think to do until it's too late. I printed every PDA volunteer sheet I'd signed. I pulled emails where I managed family finances, appointments, vacation planning, even Daniel's dental cleanings. I wrote a statement. A full outline of how I'd supported his career, covered his responsibilities at home, and built the very life he was trying to exit without consequence. Rachel smiled when she read it. This reads like a closing argument, she said. You haven't lost your edge. No, I said. I just hadn't needed it until now. Daniel kept acting normal, worse, attentive. He brought me flowers. Made reservations for a weekend getaway. Left a note on the bathroom mirror that said, I know we've been distant. Let's fix that. Was it guilt? A cover-up? Or the calm before the ambush? It didn't matter anymore. Because I had something better than romantic gestures. I had leverage. On April 30th, Rachel filed the paperwork. Sarah Miller versus Daniel Miller. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Filed in Multnomah County. Served at 10:02 a.m. the next morning, May 1st. He hadn't even gotten to his fake client meeting yet. That night, Daniel came home and tossed his keys in the bowl like usual. When he saw the manila envelope on the counter with his name, he looked confused. Then pale. What's this? He asked. I met his eyes, steady and calm. A little spring cleaning, I said. He opened it. His hands trembled. And, for the first time in months, he didn't have a plan. I did. The sound of the envelope tearing was louder than it should have been. Daniel stared down at the divorce papers like they were written in a language he didn't understand. But I watched it, the flicker of recognition in his eyes, the tightening of his jaw. He knew exactly what this was. You filed, he asked, voice low. I didn't flinch. I did. He laughed, short, nervous, fake. Sarah. Come on. Let's talk about this before it gets. Before it gets what? Public? Expensive? Out of your control. He froze. That was it. Out of his control. The one thing he hadn't counted on. He set the papers down and ran a hand through his hair. Where is this coming from? He asked. I tilted my head. Where do you want me to start? The secret bank account? The fake tax transfers? The future planning document you left on your laptop? His face drained of color. He started. I saw everything, Daniel. The hidden funds, the planned filing, the timeline to file before my birthday, the messaging script to keep me calm. Silence. You went through my files, he said slowly. I stepped forward. And you went through our marriage like it was a negotiation. Like I was an obstacle to manage. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say that would make this less ugly. The part that surprised me? I wasn't crying. I didn't feel broken or hysterical or anything close to what I imagined if this day ever came. I felt steady. 12 years of love. 1 daughter. 1 mortgage. All that history. And somehow, in this moment, all I could think was, you picked the wrong woman to underestimate. I never meant to hurt you, he finally said. That's a lie, I replied. Because this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an affair, a one-time lapse in judgment. This was calculated. Cold. You planned to dismantle my life quietly, safely, so you wouldn't get burned. He swallowed hard. That's not fair. No, Daniel. What's not fair is that I gave up a career, a salary, a name I worked for, so you could build yours. And you repaid me by moving assets behind my back and planning to divorce me before I even saw it coming. His mouth opened again. Still nothing came out. He turned away, pacing. This could still be amicable, he muttered. We can settle this like adults. I crossed my arms. Oh, we will. I just don't think you'll like what my definition of amicable looks like. He stopped walking. You've changed. No, I said. I just woke up. He stared at me, searching for some trace of the woman he thought he could manipulate. The homemaker. The soft voice. The peacekeeper. But she was gone. I wasn't going to beg him to stay. I wasn't going to give him control of the narrative. And I definitely wasn't going to let him walk away clean. You tried to plan your exit like a hostile takeover, I said. But I filed first. And I have everything I need. He exhaled hard, clearly realizing he'd underestimated just how far ahead I was now. You're really doing this, he said. I already did. Later that night, after he left to clear his head, I sat in Emma's room while she slept. I brushed a piece of hair from her face and whispered, I'm doing this for us. For a life that isn't built on secrets. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was faking it. I felt like a mother. A woman. A force. The next morning, Daniel didn't come home. Instead, I got a text. Daniel, let's take a breath before we involve the lawyers. We owe that to each other. I stared at the screen, then deleted the message. Too late for peace talks. This wasn't revenge. This was protection. I knew exactly when Daniel realized he wasn't in control anymore. It was 10:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, 3 days after I filed, when he called me from a blocked number. His voice was tight, clipped. Did you already retain Linda Stevens? I smiled into the silence. You mean the attorney you secretly met with 2 months ago while funneling money into a side account? More silence. Yes, Daniel, I said calmly. I did. Last week, in fact. I could almost hear the gears in his head grinding. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had planned to have Linda guide the whole process, quietly, efficiently, with minimal resistance from me. He'd gotten a free consultation and waited too long to sign. And now she was mine. In legal terms, it's called conflict of interest. Once I officially retained Linda, even just for a consultation, Daniel was barred from using her. His clean strategy was already unraveling. And it was about to get worse. Rachel had warned me. He'll scramble. He'll try to regain ground fast. He might even act more emotional than usual. Don't fall for it. She was right. That night, he came by the house under the guise of seeing Emma. But he stayed longer than necessary. He lingered in the kitchen while she showered, watched me from the doorway like he was waiting for a cue. Finally, he said, Do we really have to go to war over this? I set my mug down. No, Daniel. You declared war when you tried to hide your money and quietly file before my birthday. I'm just fighting back. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked down at the floor. I didn't wait for him to find his words. I've hired counsel, I said. And I suggest you do the same. Someone other than Linda. The next morning, he finally lawyered up, this time with Bruce Lanning, a gray-haired pit bull with a reputation for scorched earth tactics and expensive invoices. Rachel smirked when she saw the notice. Classic overcompensation, she said. He wanted someone flashy, someone who intimidates. Does it work? She raised an eyebrow. Not on me. By Friday, we were officially in the discovery phase. That's when both sides exchange financial information, assets, liabilities, the whole unvarnished truth. Rachel and I submitted our package, bank statements, tax returns, the prenup, and evidence of Daniel's concealed funds. Daniel's side? A mess. Incomplete records. Fuzzy math. A claim that the SRCU account was never used for marital funds, a lie we disproved instantly with timestamps and email receipts. Rachel leaned across the table and said, He's sweating. And sweating people make sloppy mistakes. But the trap wasn't just Linda. It was optics. You see, Daniel had worked hard to be the reasonable one. The guy with the calm voice, the clear plan, the friendly divorce narrative. But now, the court would see something different. They'd see a husband who secretly siphoned money, planned to file behind his wife's back, waited until his wife was financially dependent before pulling the plug. And now? Couldn't even retain the attorney he wanted because his wife got there first. That's not strategy. That's manipulation. The next week, Rachel filed our motion for asset protection. That meant freezing the major joint accounts until the court sorted everything out. Daniel's reaction? He showed up to the house unannounced, furious. "You froze our money," he snapped. "No," I said, stepping outside to meet him on the porch. "The court did. I just asked for the order." His face was red. "I need access to the business account." "You should have thought about that before you started lying," I replied. He pointed a finger. "You're not thinking about Emma. She needs stability." "Oh, I am thinking about Emma," I cut in. "That's why I'm protecting everything I can, including her future." That night, I looked through old photos of back when Daniel and I were first married. We looked young, hopeful, like we thought love would be enough. It's funny, people think divorce starts the moment the papers are filed. But the truth? Divorce starts long before that. It starts the moment one person starts hiding, and it ends the moment the other decides to stop forgiving. They say kids know more than we think. I'd been trying to shield Emma from everything, the paperwork, the tension, the slammed doors and fake smiles, but kids aren't stupid. They feel the shift in the air before we even say a word. It started small. She stopped asking when Daddy would be home. She clung to me at bedtime. And she started drawing pictures that didn't include both of us anymore. One night, I found her sitting on the stairs long after she was supposed to be asleep. Her knees were pulled up to her chest, her stuffed fox tucked tightly under her arm. "Mom," she said softly. I sat beside her, heart already bracing. "Are you and Dad mad at each other?" I paused, choosing my words like they were glass on the floor. "We're figuring some things out," I said. "Sometimes grown-ups need to make hard decisions so that things can be better later." She frowned. "Are you getting a divorce?" I didn't answer right away. But silence is also an answer. Her lips quivered. "Is it my fault?" My chest cracked open. "Emma, no. Absolutely not. You are the best thing that ever happened to us. This has nothing to do with you." She blinked hard, fighting tears. "Then why are you mad all the time?" I hugged her, held her until her breathing slowed. And as I sat there, I realized something gutting. In the battle to protect my future, I'd overlooked the one who never asked for any of this. Emma didn't care about joint accounts or legal strategy or who filed first. She just wanted her parents to be kind, present, honest. So that night, I decided she would never again hear us whisper behind doors or sense my coldness when Daniel dropped by. If I had to co-parent with him, I would do it with dignity, for her. But it wouldn't mean forgetting. It just meant rising above. Rachel called the next morning. "We got the ruling," she said. "Temporary orders are in place. You've got primary custody for now. Joint legal, pending mediation. And the finances? Frozen assets stay frozen. Daniel can't move anything without our approval. Plus, we got the temporary spousal support in place, more than what your prenup would have allowed." That last part made me pause. He would hate that. Good. Later that day, Daniel texted me. "Daniel, I want to talk. No lawyers. Just us. For Emma." I stared at the message, tempted to ignore it. But I knew better. Letting him feel like he had some control made him more predictable. Safer. So I agreed to meet. We sat at a local cafe, neutral ground. Public enough to avoid theatrics. He wore that same navy jacket he always did in court, like he wanted to look professional. But there were bags under his eyes. And for the first time, he looked rattled. "I didn't expect it to get this far," he said. "That's what happens when you plan a quiet escape and the person you're leaving decides to speak up." He sighed. "You're not who you used to be." "No," I said. "I'm better." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I'm asking you, seriously, to think about Emma. Mediation. Therapy. Something. Before this becomes ugly. I looked him dead in the eye. It's already ugly. You just didn't think I'd fight back. He rubbed his temple. Can we at least keep Emma out of court? I don't want to drag her through custody hearings. On that, we agreed. I'll never use her as leverage, I said. But that doesn't mean I won't protect her from the fallout you created. Back home, Emma was in the backyard with sidewalk chalk, drawing flowers that stretched across the concrete like vines. Want to help me? She asked. I sat beside her and picked up a piece of purple chalk. As I started drawing a butterfly, she said, I'm glad you're not yelling. Me too. Then she asked something I didn't expect. Can we still be a family even if we don't live in the same house? I looked at her, this tiny, brilliant soul with eyes that saw through everything. Yes, I said. A different kind of family, but still a real one. She nodded. As long as we don't stop loving each other. She got it. In her own way, she already understood. The truth is, sometimes the collateral damage of a broken marriage is a child who learns to speak softly to keep the peace. But not my daughter. She would learn to speak up, just like her mother finally had. I should have seen it coming. When the whispers started, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves on a windy day, I knew Daniel was working his angle. He wasn't going to let his reputation get destroyed so easily. The first hint came at a dinner party with friends. We'd been invited to the home of a mutual acquaintance, Rachel's cousin, and I could already feel the tension in the air before we even sat down. Hey, Sarah, Anna, one of my closest friends, said with forced cheer. How's everything going with you and Daniel? I heard from Mark that you two were, going through some stuff. Mark was one of Daniel's old college friends, and I could already guess what he'd said. Oh, I replied with a smile that felt more like a mask than a real expression. We're just navigating some changes. Nothing we can't handle. But Anna's eyes were sharp, too sharp. She could tell there was something more to the story, and her gaze flicked briefly to Rachel, who, even though she tried to keep things neutral, couldn't hide the uncomfortable look on her face. When the night ended, Daniel was the first to pull me aside, his voice low. You told them, didn't you? I blinked. Told who what? The truth. You told them everything. That we're breaking up over money, over what I did with the accounts. I exhaled slowly. I haven't told anyone anything, Daniel. But you're the one who's been telling people this is my fault. You're the one who's been telling Mark you can't handle me anymore. His jaw tightened. Stop twisting this. You think it's easy for me to tell people this? I've been trying to protect our image. The last thing I want is to be seen as the villain. I crossed my arms. You don't get to play the good guy anymore, Daniel. You've been working this narrative for months, and now it's unraveling. The next few days felt like walking through a minefield. People I thought I could trust, acquaintances, family, started showing up with questions. The same ones I'd already heard from Anna. Are you okay? What really happened? Is there something going on that you're not telling us? Daniel had set his story into motion. To anyone who was listening, he was the sad, misunderstood husband caught in an emotional whirlwind, while I was the unstable wife who made everything worse. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from a friend. It was a link to a post on Facebook, shared by one of Daniel's colleagues. The post was a veiled reference to our situation, written in a tone that portrayed Daniel as a loving, devoted husband who was simply caught in a difficult, personal dilemma. His words were carefully crafted to make him appear as though he was trying to avoid a messy divorce, while I, his irrational wife, was making things far worse than they needed to be. I read it twice, my hands shaking. Then I took a deep breath and smiled. It was time to turn the tables. The next day, I went into the office where I'd been consulting for the last few months. I'd spent years building my reputation there, and I knew that if I was going to regain control of the narrative, this was my best place to start. Rachel met me there for lunch, and I shared everything. The post. The story Daniel was weaving. The way he was trying to use our personal issues to manipulate the public perception. "We can't let this slide," Rachel said, her voice low but determined. "People need to hear your side. The truth is on your side." "I'm not going to let him twist this, Rachel," I said, my fingers tapping on the table. "I've already done all the legwork with the lawyers. Now I need to make sure everyone knows exactly who I am in this situation. And it's not the person Daniel's trying to paint me as." Over the next week, I carefully crafted a series of statements for my closest friends and family. I wasn't going to air everything in public. I wasn't about to make this messier than it already was, but I would make sure that no one close to me was left in the dark. I shared the full context with Anna, with my sister, and with a few trusted colleagues. I explained my side of the story, how Daniel had manipulated our finances, how I was the one who discovered the hidden assets, how this wasn't some emotional decision, but a fight for my future and Emma's. And slowly, very slowly, the truth began to circulate. One afternoon, just as I was picking Emma up from school, I got a message from one of Daniel's friends, Matt. He was always the guy who loved to talk about his perfect life, but this message was different. "Matt, I've been hearing a lot of things, Sarah. Just wanted to let you know that Daniel's been saying you're the one who's been emotional and making this ugly. I want to hear your side before I make up my mind. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, and then I smiled. Finally, the dominoes were starting to fall. Daniel couldn't control everything anymore. And soon, even the people who'd taken his side would start questioning his version of the truth. The next day, I sat down with Matt and laid out the facts. I didn't paint myself as a victim, but I certainly didn't let him believe the version Daniel had carefully crafted. By the end of the conversation, I could see the realization in his eyes. The same one that everyone else was starting to have. "You weren't the one who started this," he said softly. "No," I said, "but I'm the one who's going to finish it." Later that week, Daniel came to me again. This time, there were no pleasantries, no pretenses. "I've heard things, Sarah. People are talking. About you. About how you've spun your version of the story." I raised an eyebrow. And you need to stop. Now. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "Daniel, you don't get to control the story anymore. You made this bed. Now you'll lie in it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" I didn't think he would go this far. But Daniel had always been good at making people bend to his will. He'd spent years pretending to be the calm, reasonable one, the one who could talk his way out of any situation, make the right deal, say just the right words to get what he wanted. But this time, I wasn't interested in playing by a script. It came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, just as I was getting ready to pick up Emma from school. My phone buzzed with an incoming message, and I didn't recognize the number. "Daniel, we need to talk. In person." "I'm done playing games. Meet me at the house." I hesitated. I knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. But something about the message, his bluntness, told me this was going to be the turning point. I walked into the house an hour later, where Daniel was already waiting. He looked different, like the man I had once known, but colder, angrier. There was no warmth in his eyes, just a sharpness that made me uneasy. "Sit down," he said, gesturing toward the living room couch. I didn't move immediately, standing by the door, crossing my arms. "What's this about?" He exhaled, a tired sigh escaping his lips. "I'm done with the back and forth, Sarah. I'm giving you one final chance to settle this, or we go to war." I raised an eyebrow. "What exactly are you offering?" Daniel leaned forward, the words spilling out with a sense of finality. "I'll agree to a fair division of assets. You'll get the house, the car, and a decent chunk of the savings. I'll take the rest, but you won't fight me for custody. I'll get the weekends, and you'll have weekdays. No lawyers, no drama. We'll keep this civil." It sounded almost too good to be true, but I could see through it. This was no offer. This was an ultimatum. I took a deep breath. So, in exchange for a quick settlement, I give up my rights to fight for more. I give up the chance to protect everything I've worked for. You think that's a fair deal? He frowned. It's fair because it's the best you're going to get. You'll get to keep the house, you'll get your little lifestyle, and we can avoid dragging this through the courts. The alternative? You keep pushing, and I'll make sure this gets ugly. You won't win, Sarah. And Emma, she'll suffer. My stomach tightened. He always knew how to push my buttons. He knew exactly how to manipulate me by playing on my love for Emma. But I wasn't the same person I'd been when we first met. I wasn't that woman who would buckle under his pressure anymore. I'm not doing this for you, Daniel, I said slowly, my voice calm. I'm doing this for me and for Emma. And if you think I'm going to let you dictate the terms of this divorce, just because you think you can intimidate me, you're wrong. His expression darkened, his jaw tightening. You really want to make this harder than it has to be? I stood taller, looking him dead in the eye. If you're asking me to compromise, you're asking the wrong person. You should have thought about this before you started lying to me, before you tried to manipulate the entire situation. This is your mess, Daniel, not mine. I could feel the heat rising in the room, but I stood my ground. His threats didn't scare me. They were just smoke and mirrors designed to weaken me. He didn't realize that the woman standing before him wasn't the one he'd married. I'd grown stronger, smarter, more determined. And I wasn't going to let him walk all over me anymore. Daniel's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of doubt in them. He knew I wasn't bluffing. You're making a huge mistake, he said coldly. I didn't flinch. Maybe, but at least it's my mistake to make. There was silence between us, heavy and oppressive. Then, Daniel stood up, his frustration clear. He turned away and ran a hand through his hair, clearly debating his next move. But I didn't move. I wasn't about to beg for peace when he'd already shown his true colors. After a long moment, he muttered, "You'll regret this." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As I turned to leave, I felt the weight of the decision pressing on me. I knew that walking away from this conversation meant I was stepping into a battlefield. A real, ugly one. But it was the only choice I could make. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Emma was asleep in the next room, blissfully unaware of the war being waged around her. But I had made up my mind. There would be no easy escape for Daniel. He had crossed a line, and now I was going to make sure he couldn't take everything from me, even if it meant pushing everything to the edge. The next day, I met with Rachel and my lawyer, Linda. I could feel the walls closing in on me, the pressure building. But this time, I was ready. We're going all in, I said, my voice steady. No more compromises. No more letting him dictate the terms. We fight for everything. We fight for what's right. Rachel nodded. It's time to show him you're not the one he can walk all over anymore. Linda added, the evidence we have, Sarah, it's more than enough. We'll make sure the court sees it. You'll win this. As the week passed, I could feel the intensity building. Daniel's calls became less frequent, and when he did reach out, it was always to try and sway me back to his terms. But the more he pushed, the harder I pushed back. And every time, I became more certain that I was doing the right thing. This was no longer about saving my marriage. It was about saving my dignity, my future, and Emma's. I wasn't going to lose. Not this time. I'd always considered myself a strong person. But there are moments in life when everything feels like it's collapsing at once, and no amount of strength can hold it together. This was one of those moments. The legal documents were piled high on my desk. I'd spent the past week buried in them, going through every contract, every bank statement, every piece of evidence that could tip the scales in my favor. I'd already gotten everything ready for the fight ahead. But now, it wasn't the paperwork that was weighing on me, it was the emotional toll of the entire situation. The constant phone calls from my lawyer, Linda, updating me on the proceedings. The daily texts from Daniel, each one more desperate than the last, trying to reel me back into his web. The exhaustion I felt after every conversation, every decision. And through it all, there was Emma, my sweet, innocent daughter, who was blissfully unaware of the war being waged behind closed doors. She didn't know that every time I kissed her goodnight, I was praying that this fight wouldn't break her heart. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I reached my breaking point. I had just come from a meeting with my financial advisor, going over the last few details of my asset protection plan. The numbers were solid, the strategy in place, but it still didn't feel real. There was still a part of me that wanted to wake up from this nightmare, to go back to a time when life had been simpler, before Daniel had decided that everything I had worked for was up for grabs. When I arrived home that evening, I found a letter on the doorstep. The handwriting was familiar, Daniel's. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. As I read, my heart sank. Sarah, I know things have been rough, but this isn't the way we should be handling things. I've been patient, but I can't keep doing this. You need to make a decision. We both know that a divorce is inevitable, but I'm offering one last chance to settle things without all this drama. I'm trying to keep this civilized, but I need you to come to your senses. I know this is hard, but it doesn't have to be ugly. Let's sit down and talk this through one last time. You know where I stand. Daniel. I crumpled the letter in my hands and threw it across the room. His words, the same old lines, the same manipulation. It was like he thought he could keep me in this emotional loop, that I would eventually cave. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. I wasn't going to fall for his tricks. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the letter over and over in my mind, but I couldn't figure out what he expected from me. What more did he want? I'd given him my decision. I had made it clear that there would be no turning back, no easy way out. Yet here he was again, trying to twist my arm. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called Linda early the next day. I want to move forward, I said, my voice resolute. Let's push for everything. Full custody. Everything I'm entitled to. I won't settle anymore. There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment before Linda spoke. Are you sure? Because once we move forward with this, there's no going back. We're going to bring everything to the surface, his financial misdeeds, the lies, the manipulation. This will get ugly. I know, I replied, but I'm ready. It's time. Later that afternoon, I filed the motion. The papers were signed, and the request for full custody of Emma was officially on record. I wasn't just protecting my assets anymore. I was protecting my daughter, my future, and my own peace of mind. I didn't hear from Daniel for the rest of the day. I wasn't sure if that was a good sign or not, but I wasn't about to let his silence make me second-guess my decision. The following days were a blur. I threw myself into the legal process, leaving no stone unturned. I had no idea how long this battle would last or what it would cost, but I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to let Daniel's threats or his manipulation control my life anymore. It was Friday night when he finally called again. I could tell by the tone of his voice that something had changed. There was a desperation in his words, something that made my heart race. Sarah, I need to talk to you. Now. You've gone too far. We can't do this. It's not just about the money, okay? This is about Emma. You can't do this to her. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. He always used Emma. Always. You don't get to use her as a pawn anymore, Daniel, I said, my voice steady despite the churn of emotions inside. This isn't about her. It's about you and me. And you need to accept that we're done. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing heavily, as if he was searching for the right words. Sarah, please. I'm sorry for everything I've done. I messed up. I don't want to lose Emma. I don't want to lose you. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm willing to work on this. Please. We can fix this. We can make it work. His voice cracked slightly, but I wasn't moved. Don't make promises you can't keep, Daniel, I said coldly. It's too late for apologies. You made your choice. And now you're going to have to live with the consequences. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, and I knew that this was it. This was the moment where Daniel realized that I wasn't going to fold. I wasn't going to let him crawl back into my life just because he was scared of losing everything. This was bigger than both of us. That night, I lay in bed, exhausted but strangely at peace. I knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I had crossed a line I would never return from. I had taken control, and no matter what happened next, I would not be backing down. When you're backed into a corner, you either fight your way out or crumble. Daniel, despite all his bravado and past manipulations, was no different. And as the days went on, I could see that the weight of our impending battle was starting to get to him. The phone calls, the texts, and even the surprise visits were all a part of his plan to wear me down, to make me question my decision. But I didn't waver. Not for a second. Still, I knew Daniel wouldn't go down without a fight. And I had no doubt that he would try something, anything, to get me to back off. It was a Sunday afternoon when I got the call. I was out running errands with Emma, trying to keep things as normal as possible for her, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered it, a little annoyed at the interruption. "Sarah." Daniel's voice came through the line, tense and sharp. "We need to talk. In person." I didn't even hesitate. "No," I replied, firm. "I'm done talking." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a harsh exhale. "You're making a huge mistake. I'm warning you." I scoffed. "What more do you want from me, Daniel? You've already made it clear that you want this divorce. You don't get to control me anymore." I could hear him muttering something under his breath, but I hung up before he could say anything else. He was clearly unraveling, and that only made me more determined to see this through. But it didn't end there. That evening, when I got home from the store, I found a package waiting for me at the door. It was a small, nondescript box, but the moment I saw it, a wave of unease hit me. I opened the box carefully, half expecting it to contain some sort of threat or document that would force me to reconsider my stance. Instead, I found a letter. "Sarah, I'm not the same man I was when we first met. I know that. I've made mistakes. But I can't lose you. I'm sorry for everything I've done. I can't undo the damage, but I'm asking you one last time, please. Let's put this behind us. Let's fix what we have for Emma. I'm offering you a settlement that will make things easy on both of us. We can split everything evenly, no drama, no fighting. But only if you agree to sit down and talk to me. I need you to think about Emma. Think about the life we had. You know I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Please don't shut me out. Daniel." I stared at the letter, my hands shaking. Was he really this desperate? After everything he'd done, after all the lies and the manipulation, he thought a few heartfelt words could make everything go back to how it was? He was mistaken. I took the letter and shoved it into a drawer, locking it away. I had no interest in what he was offering. Nothing he could say or do could change my mind now. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. But the next day, I received another surprise. This time, it was an email. It wasn't from Daniel directly, but from his lawyer, a man named Samuel Hayes. The email was brief, but it made my blood run cold. "Sarah, after careful consideration, we believe it is in both of your best interests to settle this divorce without going to court. We are prepared to offer a significant sum of money to you, along with a generous custody arrangement. We would like to propose a meeting to discuss the terms and avoid any further escalation. If you refuse this offer, we will be forced to take more aggressive legal action. Please let us know your availability to discuss this matter. Best regards, Samuel Hayes, Daniel's law firm." I read the email several times, the words sinking in like cold nails being hammered into my chest. He wasn't just offering me a settlement. He was using his lawyer to threaten me. My pulse quickened as I drafted a response, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "Mr. Hayes, I've made it clear to Daniel that I will not be settling this matter on his terms. His offers are no longer relevant, and I will not be pressured into accepting any agreement that doesn't work in my favor. If Daniel insists on escalating this further, I will ensure the court hears everything, including his actions leading up to this point. Regards, Sarah. I hit send without looking back. It wasn't a threat, it was the truth. I had nothing to lose now, and Daniel had no idea what he was walking into. The next day, I got a call from Rachel. Sarah, she said, her voice tight with concern. Daniel's lawyer just called me. He's threatening to expose your financial history unless you agree to meet with them. It's his last-ditch attempt to intimidate you. I didn't flinch. Let him try. I'm not scared of him anymore. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then spoke softly. I know you're strong, but we need to be careful. This could get really messy. We need to prepare for the worst. I knew she was right, but it didn't change anything. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. That night, Daniel tried calling me again. But this time, I didn't pick up. Instead, I texted him, "If you think I'm going to play by your rules, you're wrong. This ends now. I'm done." I sat back in the chair, breathing deeply. I knew that Daniel wasn't going to give up easily. He wasn't the type of man to bow out of a fight gracefully. But this time, I wasn't fighting alone. I had a team behind me, and I wasn't going to let him win. Not now, not ever. In the coming days, things only escalated. I didn't hear from Daniel directly, but his presence loomed over every conversation, every decision. The threat of his next move, whatever it was, hung heavy in the air. But no matter what he threw at me, I was ready. I had reached the point where everything I'd worked for, everything I had endured, was about to come to a head. There would be no more middle ground, no more room for negotiation. It was time for the final confrontation. The phone buzzed at 7:30 a.m. that morning. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Daniel's name flashed across the display, but I didn't answer. I couldn't afford to engage in another one of his emotional pleas. I had learned my lesson. His words were meaningless now. Instead, I pulled myself out of bed and walked over to the small corner of my living room where I had set up a temporary office. The piles of legal documents were neatly stacked, ready for the final battle. I had to be meticulous. I couldn't leave any room for him to wiggle out of this. I had done everything I could to prepare for this moment, every contingency planned, every strategy laid out. Now it was time to play my final hand. It was a few hours later when Linda called, her voice tense but composed. "Sarah, we've received a last-minute settlement offer from Daniel's lawyer. They're desperate, and they're offering you a large sum of money along with joint custody of Emma." I felt a surge of frustration, but I kept my voice steady. "Don't even think about it. He's trying to buy me off. I won't fall for it. What's his play?" Linda hesitated, and when she spoke, her tone was grim. "It's not just the money. He's trying to manipulate you into a shared custody arrangement. He thinks it'll give him leverage, but it's clear he's trying to avoid going to trial at all costs. This is his last-ditch effort to regain control before it all falls apart." I exhaled slowly, staring at the documents in front of me. He won't get what he wants. We're not negotiating anymore. It's time to take it all the way. That afternoon, I received another email. This one, however, was different. The subject line read, "Final settlement offer, urgent." I clicked it open and read the brief but forceful message. "Sarah, we are prepared to offer you a full settlement, including a lump sum payment, joint custody of Emma, and a promise that there will be no further attempts to go public with any private matters. This is a fair offer, and we urge you to accept it before things escalate further. If you refuse, we will proceed with a formal court battle, and you can expect the full brunt of our resources to be aimed at securing Daniel's interests. We suggest you act quickly. Best regards, Samuel Hayes." I sat there for a moment, my fingers clenching the phone tightly. So, this was his final card, a threat. He thought he could scare me into giving up the fight. He thought that by dangling money and custody in front of me, I'd cave in. But he was wrong. I responded immediately. "Mr. Hayes, I have already made my decision and I stand by it. I will not be pressured into a settlement based on threats or manipulation. If Daniel wants to take this to court, then so be it. I will not accept anything less than what I deserve. Regards, Sarah. I hit send without a second thought, then placed my phone down. The calm I felt was almost eerie. The storm that Daniel had been building up was about to come crashing down. By 4 p.m. that day, I received another call from Linda. This time, she sounded even more serious than before. Sarah, you need to be prepared. Daniel's team isn't backing down. They're pushing for an expedited trial, and they're going to make a big public push. They know they don't have much time, and they're going to try to drag you through the mud. This could get ugly. I knew it was coming. I had been preparing for this moment since I had filed the divorce papers. The gloves were off, and there was no going back. I'm ready, Linda, I replied, my voice steely. Let's do this. That evening, Daniel showed up at my door. I didn't answer immediately. I wasn't about to let him think that I was going to fall for another one of his emotional stunts. But after a few minutes, I opened the door, and there he was, standing on my doorstep with an almost defeated look on his face. Sarah, please, he started, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. This is getting out of hand. We can still fix this. We can settle this, just like we always have. Think about Emma, please. I crossed my arms over my chest, not letting a shred of sympathy creep in. You've had plenty of chances, Daniel. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them. It's over. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine for any sign of weakness. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Finally, he dropped his gaze. You're really going through with it, aren't you? He muttered, more to himself than to me. I've already made my decision. It's not about what you want anymore. Daniel let out a breath, as if all the air had been sucked out of him. He seemed smaller somehow, defeated in a way I had never seen him before. But I didn't feel sorry for him. Not anymore. I'm done, Daniel, I said firmly. And if you really care about Emma, you'll stop trying to use her as leverage. You need to let go. He stood there for a moment longer, then, without a word, turned and walked away. I watched him go, the weight of everything finally hitting me all at once. The battle wasn't over, but I had just taken the first step into the next phase. The hardest part was still ahead of me, but I knew I was ready. Later that night, I found Emma asleep in her room, her small face peaceful and calm. I leaned over and kissed her forehead softly. This was all for her. No matter how messy it got, I would do whatever it took to protect her and give her the life she deserved. And if Daniel thought he could scare me into submission, he was in for a rude awakening. The cold, sterile atmosphere of the courtroom was nothing like what I had imagined. For weeks, I had prepared myself for this day, nervously going over the details with Linda, reviewing every document, every text, every piece of evidence that would secure my position. I thought I'd be anxious when it came time for the trial, but instead, a strange calm had settled over me. I was ready. And this time, it wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, protecting Emma, and showing Daniel that I was no longer the person who would cower before him. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as we took our seats. Daniel was already sitting across from me, his face a picture of cold determination, but I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. His lawyer, Samuel Hayes, sat next to him, reviewing his notes as they prepared for their opening arguments. I was surrounded by my team, Linda, of course, sitting beside me, ready to guide me through this. I didn't know how long the trial would last, but I could feel every second weighing heavily on me as the judge entered the room. The gavel struck, and the proceedings began. Mr. Hayes, the judge's voice boomed, you may proceed with your opening statement. Samuel Hayes stood up, smoothing down his suit before addressing the court. Your Honor, we are here today to seek a fair and reasonable resolution to this matter. Daniel has expressed his desire to settle amicably, but unfortunately, Sarah is determined to drag this through the courts. We seek to secure a fair custody arrangement for their daughter, Emma, and a division of assets that reflects the length of their marriage. He turned toward me, his gaze briefly meeting mine with an almost smug expression. My client, Daniel, has worked hard to provide for his family, and it is only fair that he is given a fair share of his assets. We believe that a joint custody arrangement would be in the best interest of Emma, as both parents should have an equal role in her upbringing. I forced myself not to react. I knew exactly what he was trying to do, paint me as the unreasonable party, trying to take more than I deserved. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I had the evidence, and I would make sure it spoke for itself. "Ms. MacAllister," the judge called, turning to me. "Your opening statement." I stood slowly, adjusting the hem of my dress. I knew my words mattered now more than ever. This was the moment I had been preparing for. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady but resolute. "I'm not here to make this harder than it has to be. But I refuse to settle for anything less than what is fair and right. Daniel has made it clear over the course of our marriage that he is not interested in compromise. He's only interested in winning. The evidence I have here today will show that his actions, his lies, and his manipulations have caused irreparable harm to our relationship and to me. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for a fair division of assets, full custody of our daughter, and a future that is no longer controlled by him." I glanced at Daniel, who was staring at me with a look of incredulity. He hadn't expected me to come out swinging, and I could tell it rattled him. But I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just a matter of money or assets. It was about my future and Emma's. The judge nodded, signaling that we would proceed with the testimony. The first witness called to the stand was Daniel. I watched him walk up to the witness box, trying to maintain an air of confidence, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Mr. MacAllister," the judge said, "please state your name for the record." "Daniel MacAllister," he replied, his voice tight. "Mr. MacAllister," Linda began, standing up from our table and addressing him. "Can you please describe the circumstances surrounding your decision to file for divorce?" Daniel hesitated for a moment, clearly struggling to formulate his response. I felt like our marriage was falling apart. There were too many issues, and we couldn't work through them. I didn't want to end things, but I felt like I had no choice." Linda pressed on. "And did you consider the impact that your actions, your emotional neglect, your lies, and your financial manipulations had on Sarah during the course of your marriage?" Daniel's face reddened, but he kept his composure. "I didn't intend for things to get this bad. I never meant to hurt her." But I could tell by his words and the hesitation in his voice that he wasn't being truthful. His version of the story didn't match the reality I had lived through for years. I could feel my blood boiling as he painted himself as the victim, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Linda continued with her questioning, presenting the evidence of Daniel's infidelity, his deceitful financial maneuvers, and his lack of involvement in Emma's life. With every piece of evidence that was shown, Daniel's confidence seemed to crack a little more. He was no longer the man who had controlled everything in our marriage. He was just a man desperately trying to keep his world from falling apart. After a grueling cross-examination, Linda sat back down, signaling that we were done with the first round of questioning. But I could see that Daniel wasn't prepared for what was coming next. The next witness to testify was one of our mutual friends, Rachel. She had been there during the toughest moments of our marriage, and her testimony was the nail in the coffin. Rachel spoke about the emotional abuse Daniel had inflicted, the manipulation, and the way he had used his charm to hide the truth from everyone, including me. As Rachel spoke, I could see Daniel's face contort with rage. He hadn't expected Rachel to testify, but it was clear that his carefully crafted narrative was starting to crumble. By the time the judge called for a break, the mood in the courtroom had shifted. Daniel had been exposed for the person he truly was, and it wasn't someone the court would sympathize with. But the final round of testimony, my testimony, was yet to come. I knew I had to take the stand and finish what I had started. The courtroom was eerily quiet as I stood up. The The weight of the moment settled over me like a heavy cloak, and for a brief second, I wondered if I had made the right decision. But then, I thought of Emma and everything I had fought for. I had no choice but to tell the truth, the whole truth. Linda stood beside me as I made my way to the witness stand. I felt the eyes of everyone in the room on me, Daniel, his lawyer, the judge, and the entire courtroom. It was a lot to handle, but I had prepared myself for this. This was my time to speak. The judge called the room to attention. "Ms. MacAllister," he said, his voice firm but neutral. "Please state your name for the record." "Sarah MacAllister," I replied, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling ever so slightly as I adjusted the microphone in front of me. "Ms. MacAllister," the judge continued, "you may begin your testimony." I took a deep breath and looked directly at Daniel. He wasn't looking at me anymore. His eyes were downcast, and his jaw was clenched. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sadness. This man, the one I once loved, was no longer the person I knew. The weight of that realization hit me hard, but I forced myself to focus. Linda stood up, addressing me now. "Sarah, can you please explain to the court why you are here today?" I exhaled slowly before answering. "I'm here because I was betrayed, emotionally, financially, and mentally, by the person I trusted the most. I'm here because my marriage, which I thought was built on love and respect, was nothing more than a lie. And most importantly, I'm here to protect my daughter, Emma, from the same emotional toll that I had to endure for years." I glanced at Daniel briefly. His face was unreadable, but I could see the subtle shift in his posture. He wasn't used to being confronted like this. "Could you elaborate on the emotional strain your marriage caused?" Linda asked gently, helping me stay on track. I swallowed, the memories flooding back. For years, I thought it was just me. That I was the one who wasn't doing enough, that I wasn't being the wife Daniel needed. But over time, I realized it wasn't me, it was him. He became distant, controlling, and manipulative. I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to please him, trying to make him happy, but nothing was ever good enough. I paused, looking down at my hands for a moment before continuing. I discovered that Daniel had been seeing someone else behind my back. It wasn't just one affair. It was multiple. He lied to me about everything, even our finances. He used his business to hide money and kept me in the dark about everything that mattered. I could feel the weight of his eyes on me, but I didn't look at him. I wasn't going to let him manipulate this moment. Not now. "Ms. MacAllister, can you please explain how you found out about these affairs and financial manipulations?" Linda asked. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, recalling the exact moment I had uncovered the truth. It was when I went through our bank statements. I noticed irregular transfers, withdrawals that didn't add up. And then I found evidence, photos, texts, things I couldn't ignore. That's when everything fell apart. I looked up at the judge now. I confronted him, but he denied it all. He lied and tried to blame me for everything. He told me I was overreacting, that I was imagining things. But I knew the truth. And once I knew it, I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. I glanced at Daniel again, this time allowing myself to meet his gaze. His eyes were cold and hard, but I didn't flinch. He wasn't going to win this. "Ms. MacAllister, can you explain the impact all of this had on you personally?" Linda asked, her voice calm but empathetic. I nodded, trying to find the right words. "It destroyed me. I lost myself in that marriage. I gave everything I had to Daniel, to our family, and when I found out what he had done, it felt like the ground beneath me had crumbled. I questioned my worth, my abilities, my place in the world. I thought I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy of love. I stopped myself, taking a deep breath. But I've come to realize something. What Daniel did to me, what he did to our marriage, was not my fault. I wasn't the one who broke our vows. I wasn't the one who betrayed our family." There was a long silence in the courtroom as my words hung in the air. I could see Daniel's jaw tighten, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. It was brief, fleeting, but it was there. Linda continued. Ms. MacAllister, can you explain the steps you've taken since discovering these betrayals? I didn't hesitate. I filed for divorce. I knew I couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies anymore. I started protecting my assets, securing my future, and most importantly, I made sure Emma would be safe. I wasn't going to let him use her as a pawn in his game. The room was silent again, and I could see Daniel's frustration growing. He was trying so hard to maintain control of the narrative, but I had already taken that power away. I wasn't the passive, submissive wife I had once been. I had found my voice, and now I was using it. Linda nodded, then looked at me with a reassuring smile before sitting down. The judge turned his attention to Daniel, who was now visibly agitated. Mr. MacAllister, the judge called, do you have any questions for the witness? Daniel stood slowly, his voice tight with anger. Sarah, are you really going to stand there and tell everyone that you had no part in this? That you had no idea what was going on? You're blaming me for everything, but you were just as much a part of this marriage as I was. You never once questioned my actions or my choices. You always just went along with whatever I said. The courtroom was quiet for a moment. Everyone could feel the tension in the air, but I knew the truth now. Daniel wasn't angry because I had betrayed him. He was angry because I was no longer the person he could control. I stood up, my voice steady. I wasn't blind, Daniel. I just trusted you. And you took advantage of that. But I'm not your victim anymore. I'm here because I've learned to trust myself. And I will not let you manipulate me again. There was a long pause before the judge finally spoke. Thank you, Ms. MacAllister. You may step down. As I left the witness stand and returned to my seat, I could feel the weight of the moment. It wasn't just a victory in the courtroom, it was a personal victory. I had taken control of my life back, and nothing, not even Daniel, would take that from me. The days since my testimony felt like an eternity. The courtroom had quieted down after the emotional outbursts, the tension between Daniel and me palpable as ever. The trial had lasted for what seemed like a lifetime, but now, all we had left were closing arguments and the judge's final decision. I sat in my chair, staring at the floor, my mind racing. My heart was in my throat, and I couldn't escape the nagging feeling of uncertainty. Would the judge believe me? Would he see through Daniel's facade of victimhood and manipulation? For the first time since the trial began, I allowed myself to feel the weight of everything that had transpired. The betrayal, the pain, the long hours of preparation, all of it had led to this moment. The battle was almost over, but the hardest part was yet to come, waiting for the judgment. Linda's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. She was discussing our closing argument with me in quiet tones, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the nervous energy that buzzed around the courtroom. We've done everything we can, Sarah, she said reassuringly, placing a hand on my shoulder. We've presented the facts, the evidence, and the truth. Now it's up to the judge. You've already won in ways that matter far more than money. I nodded, trying to find comfort in her words. The logical part of me knew she was right. No amount of money could buy back my peace of mind or the confidence I had regained. But there was still that lingering fear in my chest. Daniel had always been a master at spinning things his way. Would the judge see through it? The gavel struck again, signaling the beginning of the final stage of the trial. The judge, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a stern expression, called the room to attention. We are now in the final phase of this case. I will now hear closing arguments from both sides. Samuel Hayes, Daniel's lawyer, stood first. He was as polished as ever, his voice smooth and persuasive as he began his closing statement. Your Honor, he began, this case has been an emotional one, filled with personal attacks and accusations. But at the heart of it all, we must remember that this is not about revenge. This is about fairness. Daniel MacAllister has been a devoted husband and father. He has worked hard his entire life to provide for his family. Yes, mistakes were made, but those mistakes do not define who he is. What we ask today is for a fair and equitable resolution. We ask for a division of assets that reflects the contributions both parties have made and for a shared custody arrangement that will allow Emma to continue to have a relationship with both parents. His words were smooth, almost rehearsed, and I could see Daniel nodding along, trying to look empathetic. But I knew the truth. Behind all of his claims of devotion was a man who had lied, cheated, and manipulated his way through life. This wasn't about fairness, it was about control. I braced myself for Linda's turn. She stood up slowly, confident and poised, as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady, "what we have here is not a simple case of a marriage falling apart. This is the result of years of manipulation, deceit, and emotional abuse. Daniel MacAllister's actions have not only hurt Sarah, but have also affected their daughter, Emma. This case is about more than just property or money. This is about protecting the well-being of a child and ensuring that Sarah, who has been nothing but devoted to her family, is given the security and peace of mind she deserves." Linda paused, looking directly at the judge. Daniel MacAllister has shown no true remorse for his actions. He has continued to manipulate the situation, even throughout this trial. Sarah has proven herself to be the stronger, more responsible parent. She has made the difficult decision to protect herself and her daughter from further harm. I held my breath as Linda continued, presenting the facts one last time. She spoke about the evidence we had collected, the testimony of Rachel, and the clear pattern of financial deception that Daniel had orchestrated. Every word was carefully chosen to show the truth of the situation and expose Daniel for the person he was. I ask you, Your Honor, to consider not only the legal aspects of this case, but the emotional toll it has taken on Sarah and Emma. We seek not revenge, but protection and fairness. The division of assets must reflect the betrayal and hardship Sarah has endured, and Emma must be allowed to have the future she deserves, one without the shadow of emotional manipulation hanging over her. The courtroom was silent as Linda finished her statement, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride wash over me. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself. I had fought back against the person who had once controlled me, and no matter the outcome, that in itself was a victory. The judge took a moment to reflect before speaking. "Thank you, counsel," he said, his voice measured. "I will take all of the evidence presented into consideration and issue my ruling." And then we waited. The next few hours felt like a blur. I couldn't focus on anything except the sound of my own heartbeat thumping in my ears. It felt as though the clock was moving slower with each passing minute. I tried to keep myself busy, flipping through my notes, but every once in a while, my mind would wander to the potential outcomes. What if the judge sided with Daniel? What if he didn't think I had done enough to prove my case? Finally, the judge returned to the courtroom, his expression as neutral as it had been throughout the trial. The tension in the air was palpable as he sat at the bench and called the room to attention. After reviewing the evidence and considering the arguments from both parties, I have reached my decision. I leaned forward in my seat, trying to steady my breathing. "The court rules in favor of Sarah MacAllister," the judge said, his voice steady. "The division of assets will be as follows. Sarah will retain sole ownership of the family home, as well as a majority of the couple's shared assets. Custody of the child, Emma, will be granted to Sarah with visitation rights for Daniel, to be determined in the future. Furthermore, the court has found that Daniel MacAllister's actions during the marriage were damaging to the emotional well-being of both Sarah and their daughter, and as such, additional support will be awarded to Sarah to ensure her financial stability moving forward." The words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The relief was overwhelming. I had done it. I had won. As the judge concluded the session and the courtroom began to empty, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't anticipated. This battle was finally over and I was free. Free from Daniel's control, free from the weight of betrayal, and free to start over. I turned to Linda, who was smiling at me with pride in her eyes. "You did it," she said, squeezing my hand. "You really did it." I looked across the room at Daniel, who was standing with his lawyer, clearly trying to hide his anger. But I wasn't scared anymore. He had lost, and so had the version of me who had once feared him. This was my new beginning. And no one, not even Daniel, could take that from me. The day after the final judgment was a blur of emotions. I was exhausted, mentally and physically drained, but there was also a lightness, an unfamiliar sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. I was free. Free from Daniel's control, free from the constant tension of wondering what lie he would tell next, free from the feeling of being trapped in a marriage that had suffocated me. But even though the legal battle had ended, I knew that the hardest part was just beginning. The fight for my peace, my independence, and my future had been won, but the journey of rebuilding my life would take time. That evening, after the trial was officially over, I sat on the couch in the living room of the house that was now mine. I glanced over at Emma, who was curled up with a book, her face lit by the soft glow of the lamp beside her. She hadn't fully understood the gravity of the situation, but I could tell she sensed that something had changed. She looked up from her book, catching my gaze. "Mom," she asked softly, her voice tentative, "are we really going to be okay now?" I smiled at her, a genuine smile that I hadn't shared in what felt like forever. "We're going to be more than okay, sweetie. We're going to be great." I could see the relief in her eyes. For the first time in months, I saw her shoulders relax, her worry lines soften. She knew things weren't perfect, but she knew we had won. And in that moment, that was enough. The following days were a whirlwind of changes. I started to make decisions that I had put off for far too long, ones that had always seemed impossible under Daniel's thumb. I began to unpack boxes that had been gathering dust in the back of the closet, things I had long since ignored. I sorted through old memories, each item bringing back pieces of my past that felt like they belonged to someone else. I also took the time to re-examine my finances, something I had been too afraid to do before. But now, with the court ruling in my favor, I had the clarity to move forward. I spoke with a financial advisor to ensure that the assets I had fought so hard for would be protected and that I could build a secure future for Emma and me. As I went through the process of re-establishing my independence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of empowerment. The world was open to me in a way it hadn't been in years. I could make my own decisions, build my own path. The weight of Daniel's control had lifted, and I had rediscovered my own voice. But there was still a lingering unease. Though I felt like I was finally free, there was a part of me that was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of the unknown. I hadn't been single in over a decade, and the idea of navigating the world without the safety of a familiar partnership was daunting. But I reminded myself of something I had learned over the past few months. I was stronger than I had ever known. I had faced betrayal and heartbreak head-on, and I had survived. And now I was going to thrive. A week after the trial, I received a call from Linda. Her voice was cheerful, but there was a note of concern underneath it. "Sarah, I know it's been a whirlwind, but I've been thinking. You've worked so hard to rebuild your life, but there might be an opportunity here that you don't want to miss." I leaned back against the kitchen counter, my curiosity piqued. "What kind of opportunity?" Linda hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I've been approached by a nonprofit organization that focuses on supporting women who have gone through emotional abuse and financial hardship. They're looking for someone to lead a new initiative to help women rebuild their lives after divorce. They need someone with personal experience, someone who understands what it takes to start over. And I thought of you." I was taken aback. "Wait, you're asking me to take on a leadership role? After everything that's happened?" "You have the strength, Sarah. And you have the heart. You fought your way back, and now you can help others do the same. It's an opportunity to turn your pain into something meaningful, something that can make a real difference." I stood there in silence, turning the idea over in my mind. It was a big decision, one that would require a lot of energy and commitment. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a calling. I had been through so much, and if I could use my experience to help others, maybe it would bring a sense of purpose to all the pain I had endured. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice steady but thoughtful. "But this could be just what I need to make a real difference." "I knew you'd say that," Linda said with a laugh. "Let me know your decision when you're ready." "I'm here for you, Sarah, every step of the way." As I hung up the phone, I felt a surge of emotion. This was the kind of opportunity one had been waiting for, an opportunity to take control of my life and make a difference in the world. It felt like the perfect way to honor the journey I had been on, to show Emma that we could turn hardship into something powerful. And so I made my decision. I was going to take the job. The next few weeks were a blur of preparations and meetings. I officially joined the organization, using my experience to shape a program that would help women rebuild after the trauma of a toxic relationship. I met with other survivors, shared my story, and began to see the healing process from a new perspective. Helping others allowed me to heal parts of myself I didn't even realize were still hurting. Through it all, I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been buried for far too long. My passion, my drive, my creativity, all of it was coming back to me in ways I hadn't expected. I felt alive again, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. And then one evening, as I was finishing up work, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something in my gut told me it was important. I answered. "Sarah?" Daniel's voice came through the receiver, raw and uncertain. "We need to talk." I stared at my phone, my finger hovering over the screen, unsure if I should answer. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Daniel." My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I questioned whether I was truly ready for this. After everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the pain, it seemed almost surreal that he was calling me now, after all this time. But then I reminded myself, I was no longer the woman who would cower in fear of his manipulation. I wasn't the woman who would let him control me with his words or guilt me into submission. I was stronger than I had ever been, and if he was reaching out, it was because he wanted something, just as he always had. With a deep breath, I pressed the green button. "Sarah?" His voice was softer than I expected, almost tentative. "It's Daniel." "I know who it is," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, guarded. "What do you want?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear him trying to gather his thoughts, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that I wasn't the one who was nervous anymore. I just wanted to talk," he stammered, an unfamiliar vulnerability in his voice. "I know things have been difficult, but I think we should talk. About everything." "About what exactly, Daniel?" I leaned back against the counter, my arms crossed. "Because there's nothing left to talk about. You made your choice." "I know I did," he said, his voice growing more urgent. "I messed up. I know that now. I never should have let it get this far." Stop. I cut him off, my voice firm. "Don't try to spin this like you're some remorseful victim. You betrayed me, Daniel. You lied. You manipulated me for years, and now you want to talk about everything? What exactly are you hoping for here?" Another silence followed, and I could hear him exhale sharply. I didn't know what I was doing, Sarah. I was lost. I made choices I regret. I thought I had everything under control, but it's all falling apart now. The divorce, the financial mess, the distance from Emma. I can't live like this anymore. I raised an eyebrow, my grip tightening on the phone. "So now you regret it all, huh? After everything? After using me as a pawn in your game for years? You don't get to just waltz back into my life and expect things to magically change." His tone shifted then, and I could sense the desperation in his voice. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were, Sarah. I'm not asking for that. I want to try and make things right. I want to be a part of Emma's life. And maybe there's a chance we could figure things out. For her." I closed my eyes, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "For her? Or for you? Because if you really cared about Emma, you wouldn't have walked out on her. You wouldn't have tried to tear this family apart in the first place. Sarah, please. His voice softened, almost pleading. I've been through a lot too. You're not the only one who's hurting. I lost my family, my marriage. I don't know how to fix it, but I need to try. For Emma. For us. The words stung, but I refused to let them control me. I had spent too long feeling like I owed him something, like I needed to fix him or help him see the error of his ways. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had learned that the hard way. I had learned that I couldn't change him, and I didn't have to. You want to make things right, Daniel? I said, my voice steady. Start by taking responsibility for what you've done. Start by understanding that you don't get to just come back into our lives because you feel bad. I've rebuilt my life from the ground up, and I'm not going to let you disrupt that just because you're feeling sorry for yourself now. Another pause. I could tell he didn't know how to respond. For so long, he had been the one with the control, the one calling the shots, but now the tables had turned. I wasn't the same woman who had been afraid of his wrath. I wasn't the woman who had bent over backwards to appease him. I was someone else now, someone who had learned to stand firm in her own truth. I'm not asking you to take me back, Sarah, he said finally, his voice quieter now. I need to be a father to Emma. And I need to try and make amends. That's all. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I bit my lip, unsure of how to respond. This wasn't the conversation I had expected. There was a part of me that wanted to tell him to go to hell, to remind him of everything he had done and tell him that he had lost any chance at redemption with me. But I also knew that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Emma and her relationship with her father, whatever that might look like moving forward. I'll think about it, I said, my voice quieter now. But don't get your hopes up. I'm not going to let you just waltz back in without proving that you've really changed. You've got a lot to make up for. I know, he replied softly, and I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't say anything else before ending the call. My heart was racing, and I felt a strange mixture of emotions swirling inside me. On one hand, part of me wanted to believe that Daniel could change, that he could finally be the father Emma deserved. But the other part of me, the part that had been hurt so deeply, the part that had rebuilt everything on her own, wasn't sure if I could ever trust him again. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let him manipulate me again. If he truly wanted to make amends, he would have to prove it, through actions, not words. The next few days were filled with a new sense of uncertainty. Daniel's call had shaken me more than I cared to admit. It was hard to shake the old instincts, the ones that had always pushed me to fix things for him, to make everything okay. But I knew better now. I had to focus on what was best for Emma and for myself. The days following Daniel's call felt surreal. His sudden change of heart was so unlike anything I'd ever seen from him. I wasn't sure if it was genuine or just a last-ditch attempt to salvage his own reputation, but I knew one thing. I wasn't about to let my guard down. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. It was Emma who was on my mind the most. For her sake, I knew I had to at least entertain the idea of co-parenting with Daniel. She had every right to have a relationship with her father, even if that relationship had been damaged by his choices. But I had to protect her heart. I wasn't going to let her fall back into the trap that Daniel had set so many times before, where he would promise the world only to take it away at a moment's notice. Daniel's first attempt at reaching out to Emma came a few days after our phone conversation. He called the house, asking if he could come by to spend some time with her. I hadn't expected him to act so quickly, but part of me appreciated that he wasn't wasting any time. He wanted to prove he was serious. I had mixed feelings about it. Was this a genuine effort, or was he just trying to make himself look better? I didn't know, and I wasn't about to give him a free pass just because he showed up with a good intention for once. But Emma, she had been so quiet, so withdrawn since everything had happened. I didn't want to keep her from the possibility of healing, if that was what she truly wanted. Mom, can I see him? I mean, just for a little while? Emma asked hesitantly as she stood by the door, holding her phone with Daniel's number on the screen. I knew this wasn't easy for her. She had been caught in the middle of all of this for so long, and I could tell she was longing for some semblance of normalcy, even if that meant trying to rebuild a relationship with her father. But I wasn't willing to just let her go without a second thought. I put my hands on her shoulders and looked her in the eyes. Sweetheart, I know you want to see your dad, and I understand. But you have to remember what happened. I can't let him hurt you again. Emma looked down, tears welling up in her eyes. I know, Mom, I know. But I just miss him. I miss the way things used to be before everything changed. I just want to see if he really means it this time. I sighed, fighting the emotional tug in my chest. I knew she was confused. She wanted to believe that people could change, that her father could be the man he promised her he would be. But I wasn't sure if that man existed anymore. We'll take it slow, okay? I said gently, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. If you want to see him, we'll set a boundary. You don't have to forgive him overnight, but if you need to talk, or if you feel uncomfortable, you come to me. Promise? Emma nodded, and though her eyes were still sad, I could see a flicker of hope in them. She needed to believe that there was still some goodness left in her father. And I could give her that space, as long as I was there to protect her from getting hurt again. Later that afternoon, Daniel arrived at our house. He stood awkwardly on the front porch, as if unsure of what to do with his hands or where to look. His posture was stiff, almost as if he was trying to make himself small, perhaps to avoid reminding me of the man he had been. Hi, he said, his voice tentative. I just wanted to talk to Emma for a bit. Is she here? I nodded, stepping aside so he could come in. She's in her room. I'll let her know you're here. As I walked toward Emma's room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a tightrope. I wasn't sure how much I could trust him, and I wasn't going to let him manipulate me into believing that he could fix everything with a few kind words. Still, I couldn't ignore the fact that this was Emma's father, and if there was any chance of them having a healthy relationship, now was the time to see if it could happen. I knocked lightly on Emma's door and opened it to find her sitting on the edge of her bed, lost in thought. Emma, I said gently, your dad's here. She looked up, her face both excited and apprehensive. Okay, I'll go out. I watched her walk down the hall and into the living room, where Daniel stood waiting, fidgeting with his hands. His face lit up when he saw her, but there was a nervousness in his smile that didn't escape my notice. Hey, kiddo, he said, his voice soft. I've missed you. Emma didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her arms crossed, watching him carefully. It was clear that she was unsure of how to proceed. She wanted to believe in him, but how could she after everything he had done? I've missed you too, Dad, she finally said, her voice quiet, almost hesitant. But things are different now. Daniel's smile faltered, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. I know it's different. But I want to try, Emma. I want to be there for you. And for your mom. I made a lot of mistakes, but I want to fix them. I want to prove to you that I can be a good father. I watched as Emma studied him, her eyes searching for the truth behind his words. She was testing him, the same way I was. And I could tell that deep down, she didn't want to get hurt again. But she also wanted to believe that people could change. I don't know if you can, Dad, she said, her voice wavering. But I'll try. I'll try if you're really serious about it. Daniel nodded solemnly, his expression softening. I am, Emma. I swear to you, I'm serious. As they sat down together on the couch, I stayed in the kitchen, watching from a distance. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see the way Emma's body language shifted. She wasn't as tense as she had been when he first walked in. She was listening. She was giving him a chance. I wasn't sure how long this new attempt would last, but I knew I had to stay vigilant. I couldn't let myself believe that everything had magically been fixed in a few short days. This was just the beginning, and the real work would take time. The days passed in a quiet but tense rhythm. Daniel had been visiting more frequently, spending time with Emma and, to his credit, making an effort to be present in her life. It was the first time in a long while that I saw Emma smile when she came back from one of their visits. But as much as I wanted to believe that Daniel was genuinely changing, a part of me still couldn't shake the skepticism that lingered in my heart. Trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild and even harder to let go of. I couldn't let my guard down, not completely. Not after everything he had done. I had spent years trying to hold our family together, and now, after everything he put us through, I was expected to just welcome him back as if nothing had happened. But Emma, she deserved a father who loved her, even if he had been absent for far too long. She deserved to have that chance, even if it meant that I had to step back and allow him to be a part of her life, albeit cautiously. One afternoon, after one of Daniel's visits, Emma and I were sitting in the living room, quietly sorting through some of her homework. She was unusually quiet, and when I glanced up from the kitchen counter, I noticed she was staring off into space, lost in thought. "Emma?" I asked softly, putting down the dish towel I was holding. "Are you okay?" She looked up, blinking as if she had just snapped out of a trance. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine." Just thinking. I crossed the room and sat next to her on the couch, waiting for her to elaborate. I could tell something was bothering her, but I didn't want to push her. I had to let her come to me when she was ready. After a moment of silence, Emma spoke, her voice hesitant. "I don't know, Mom. I mean, I want to believe him, you know? I really do. But I don't know if I can." My heart ached at the uncertainty in her words. It was so clear that she wanted to trust him, but the pain of his betrayal still lingered in her heart. She had every right to be conflicted. I had felt the same way when I was in her shoes, trying to figure out whether I should believe the lies or the promises. "You don't have to decide everything right now, sweetheart," I said gently, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "You can take your time. It's okay to feel uncertain. But no matter what happens, you have me. I'm here. I'll always be here for you." Emma nodded, her eyes filling with emotion. She didn't say anything else, but I could tell that the weight of the situation was starting to sink in. She wanted a family. She wanted things to be the way they used to be, but could they ever truly go back to that? The next few days saw more of the same. Daniel continued to visit Emma regularly, sometimes taking her out for ice cream or going to the park. It was clear he was trying to be involved, and I had to admit he was doing a better job than I had expected. But there was something unsettling about his efforts. Was he trying to be a father, or was this some kind of calculated move to manipulate Emma into forgiving him, and by extension, me? I had been through enough manipulation from Daniel to recognize the signs. He had always been so good at playing the victim, making me feel sorry for him, even when he was the one in the wrong. He had done it for years, and now it seemed like he was trying to do it again, but this time, with Emma as his target. That night, after another one of Daniel's visits, I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers in front of me. My mind was racing. I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something wasn't quite right. The way Daniel had been acting, how he suddenly wanted to make things right after everything that had happened, was it truly sincere, or was he just trying to find a way back into my life? I thought about the conversation we had had a week ago. He had promised me he wasn't asking for reconciliation, just a chance to be a father to Emma. But I wasn't sure I believed him anymore. Could I trust that this was all for the right reasons, or was there something more behind his efforts? I knew I had to talk to him. I couldn't keep second-guessing his motives forever. If he truly wanted to change, I needed to hear it from him. I needed to hear him take responsibility for what he had done, not just to me, but to Emma. Only then could I decide what was best for her. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a moment. I hadn't spoken to him directly since our last conversation, but tonight felt like the right time. I took a deep breath and dialed his number, my thumb trembling slightly as I pressed the call button. It rang 3 times before he picked up. "Hello. Daniel, it's Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to talk to you. About Emma. About everything." There was a pause on the other end. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I exhaled slowly, gathering my thoughts. "I've been watching you, and I've been listening to Emma. I'm not sure if this change is real, or if it's just another one of your games. But if you truly want to be in her life, you need to show me that you can be a father to her, not just someone who shows up when it's convenient." "I understand," Daniel said, his tone surprisingly calm. "I know I've made mistakes. But I'm trying, Sarah. I'm really trying." "Trying isn't enough anymore," I said firmly. "You have to prove it. You need to show me, show both of us, that you're not doing this for yourself. If you really care about Emma, you'll put her first. No more empty promises. No more manipulation." "I know," he repeated, softer this time. "I'm sorry for everything. I'll do whatever it takes. Just give me the chance." "Prove it," I said, my voice hard. "And maybe, just maybe, I'll believe you." We hung up shortly after, but the conversation had left me feeling unsettled. I wasn't sure if Daniel was truly ready to change, or if he was just desperate to make up for lost time. But one thing was clear: I couldn't trust him completely yet. I had to be cautious, for Emma's sake and for mine. The fragile trust we were building would take time, and, even more than that, it would take genuine effort. If Daniel truly wanted to prove himself, he would have to show us through his actions, not just his words. The days after our conversation lingered like a heavy fog. Daniel had shown up every day, steadily maintaining the facade of being a responsible father, offering small gestures of kindness, buying Emma gifts, taking her out for dinners, even helping with her school projects. But for me, the question still remained: was this real, or was he just playing the role of the perfect father to win us back? The real test, however, was not in the gifts or the apologies. It was in the moments when things got hard. When life wasn't about playing nice for a few hours, but about standing up when it mattered most. And that moment came sooner than I expected. It was a Friday evening when I got the call. Emma's voice, usually so steady, sounded alarmed. "Mom, you need to come to the school," she said, her voice panicked. "I'm in trouble." "Emma, what happened?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never heard her like this before. "There was a fight," she said quickly, almost in a whisper. "I didn't start it, but they think I did. Please, Mom, I need you." "I'm coming," I said without hesitation, grabbing my keys and rushing out the door. As I drove to the school, my mind raced. What kind of fight? And why was Emma involved? When I arrived at the school, I found Emma sitting in the principal's office, her head down, looking defeated. A few other students were gathered in the hallway, and I could hear their murmurs of gossip, none of it good. I walked in, my gaze immediately finding Emma. She looked up, her face flushed with anxiety, and stood quickly as she saw me approach. "Mom," she said quietly. "I didn't do anything wrong, I swear." "But they think I did." "Who thinks you did?" I asked, my voice sharp with concern as I turned to the principal, who had just stepped into the room behind me. "Miss Parker," the principal said, adjusting his glasses. "One of the other students reported that your daughter was involved in an altercation. Apparently, it was a verbal argument that escalated. I could tell by the way Emma was avoiding eye contact that she wasn't telling me everything, but she didn't need to. I knew her well enough to know when she was hiding something." "Emma," I said, gently lifting her chin with my hand so that she would look at me. "What happened? Did you start the argument?" She shook her head quickly. "No, Mom. I swear I didn't start it. But they said I did." There were some things said that just made me snap. The principal folded his arms. "Emma, we don't tolerate violence of any kind here, no matter the situation. I think we need to call your father. If this situation escalates, we may need to take further disciplinary action." The mention of Daniel's name struck me like a blow to the chest. As much as I hated to admit it, Emma needed him now. She needed him to step up and show that he was capable of being more than just an occasional visitor in her life. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Daniel. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello." "Sarah." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it I hadn't heard in a long time. "I just got a call from the school. Emma's in trouble. She's here in the principal's office. They think she's involved in some kind of fight. I need you to come here, Daniel. This is your chance to show that you're serious about being her father. This is the moment." I didn't wait for him to respond, knowing he needed to process what was happening. I hung up, turned to Emma, and held her hand. "I'm here, sweetheart. Don't worry, okay?" Emma nodded, but the doubt in her eyes was impossible to miss. She wanted him there, but she wasn't sure if she could rely on him, not after everything he had done. I couldn't blame her. A few minutes later, Daniel arrived at the school. He stepped into the office, looking disheveled but determined, as if he knew this was a pivotal moment in his relationship with Emma. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice tight with concern as he walked past the principal's desk. "Right here," I said, gesturing to Emma. "Emma, this is your dad. He's here now." She looked up, hesitating for a second, before she stood up to face him. There was a mix of emotions on her face, fear, anger, and a quiet hope that perhaps this time, things would be different. "Dad," Emma said, her voice small. "I didn't start it. They said I did, but I didn't." Daniel knelt down to her level, his eyes soft. "Emma, I believe you. I'm here now, okay? Let's talk to the principal together, and we'll figure this out." "I'm not going anywhere." I could see it in his eyes, something had shifted. He wasn't just saying the right things, he was taking responsibility. For the first time, Daniel was putting Emma before himself. The principal cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "I'll need to speak with Emma's teachers and review the situation before making any decisions. But I think it's best if we move forward as a team. We don't want this to escalate." "Of course," Daniel said, standing up and turning to the principal. "Whatever it takes. We'll make sure Emma is supported through this." The next few days passed in a blur. The school investigated the situation thoroughly, and eventually, they cleared Emma of any serious wrongdoing. The student who had instigated the argument was given a warning, and Emma was allowed to return to her classes without any further disciplinary action. I was proud of Emma for handling the situation with maturity, but I was equally relieved to see Daniel step up in a way I hadn't expected. He was there for Emma in a way he never had been before. He didn't just show up for the easy moments, he showed up when she needed him most. The following evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel and I sat in the living room, the weight of the day still lingering in the air between us. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of peace. "I know I haven't been the father you or Emma needed," Daniel said quietly, his eyes meeting mine. "But I'm going to try, Sarah. I'll keep trying." I nodded, feeling a cautious hope stirring in my chest. It wasn't a guarantee, but for the first time, I believed him. And maybe, just maybe, we could begin again, this time, with real change. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?